Hey, how's it going, Captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about how to micromanage your planes when it comes to playing carriers. I think that the hardest challenge to overcome as a carrier player is really managing and organizing your attacks, or at least organizing what you're about to do with your carriers, which is why a good chunk of players on World of Warships who wants to play carriers but defer from it because of the micromanagement. When they see somebody play a carrier, it feels like it's tough work, and it is tough to play carriers at times, but at the end of the day, it is as easy as it is to play carriers compared to playing a destroyer, a battleship, or a cruiser. It's just that you gotta think differently. For example, destroyers just can't go out in the middle of the map and start shooting their guns, dropping torpedoes. You got to think like a destroyer. Be stealthy at times, use your guns when you need to, and drop your torpedoes in a good position. We are thinking a lot when it comes to playing destroyers, but when you're used to playing destroyers, you just don't think about because you're already in the habit of doing it. Battleships, you look on the map, you don't get yourself into a terrible position when it comes to playing battleship. Pick your target, fire your guns, lead your guns, all sorts of stuff. Carriers is the same amount of work. It's just that people are not used to seeing this type of gameplay style, if I put it that way. And I noticed that a lot of people have been asking me why I play in the big map view, or why I do this, how I manage this, and all sorts of stuff. Alright. When it comes to seeing something complex, and this is something I learned as a engineer major. When I was doing all my engineering class, one skill that built upon my ability to become an engineer, aside from having the knowledge behind engineering, is learning to break complex concept down and analyze the smaller parts, becoming more abstract, if I put it that way. So in this case, when I was taking the microprocessor class, which is designing a microprocessor, you got this microprocessor and it's very complex. You got different modules. You got like a shifter, you got an adder, you got a multiplier, you got this storing this, things moving left and right. So there's a lot of things going around with this diagram for me, and I was just mind blown. How can I understand this microprocessor within a month in order to finish my project? And the best way to do it is start from somewhere. Pick somewhere. Pick somewhere that you feel like you need to start. So you're picking a priority here, and you're breaking this massive microprocessor into smaller bits. And once you understand each small bit, you start with one small bit to the other small bit of the thing, and then eventually you put it together and you will understand what is going on. And although this is like an engineering thing, this is one thing that scientists and engineers and mathematics, when they come together, the most important skill aside from knowledge of the field is really how they approach the process. There is a mathematical term that is called the greedy algorithm. And the algorithm says that you do everything you can the moment you see it, and then you get stuck. Because you're hoping that once you've done everything you can, it will magically appear some kind of result that you're looking for. That isn't the case, because you're doing everything without thinking it through, because there are certain steps that you can't do first without the other step coming before it. So in this case with carriers, a lot of people who started play carriers, or at least even play carriers to tier 9, tier 10, might apply the greedy algorithm because they see people who are doing a lot of things at once, fast, efficiently, make it look cool, look professional. But the truth is, when it comes to playing carriers, it's not about how good you are when it comes to using your torpedo bombers or your dive bombers or your fighters in terms of executing the attack right away, rushing it. Because I think that a lot of people associate speed with being good because it just looks cool. In reality, the player who actually takes the time to execute their plan will have a higher success and less mistake, because it's all about making the least amount of mistakes when it comes to playing carriers, because each attack takes a while. And each move that you make as a carrier player can really affect the outcome of the situation. You screw up on your fighter because you rush the fighter, then your teammate will die. It's as simple as that. Just take a moment, slow down, and I noticed that when people play carriers, they're thinking very fast. They get into a state as in terms of the fight or flight or adrenaline rush state. And this happens when you're in some kind of intense moment, and it's always feeling intensive if you're playing carriers because a lot of things are going around you because you're controlling the entire map compared to a battleship, destroyer, and cruisers, which they are more concerned with what is around them in the current proximity. So slow down, guys. Just take a moment to think and slow down, okay? When you're in the adrenaline rush state, your mind is going so fast that everything around you seems slow, but in reality it's actually faster than what you're thinking, okay? So 1 second in the real world will feel like 3 seconds in your mind when you're in a adrenaline rush state. And that usually happens when you play carriers because a lot of things are going all over the place. You're getting nervous that if you don't do everything right, your team will yell at you, enemy team will yell at you, you might screw up this, might screw up that, and then it just overwhelms you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the Great Phoenix and get into a training room, and I'm going to show you guys why I play this way, why did I do this, why I do that, in order to give you guys a feel of how you can properly execute a carrier tactic. Alright guys, we are in the training room, and here I have my Taiho, and I'm going to be talking about the process. So breaking it down, what do you want to do with your carrier? Don't worry about how you're going to attack the enemy. Don't worry about how you're going to shoot down the planes. Start off with the beginning. What are you going to do first? Now in the beginning of the match, the first thing I do is send my fighters out to scout, because it doesn't make sense to send your bombers out there if you don't know where you're going with them. So in the beginning, I scout. Now there are two different ways to play CVs when it comes to playing CVs in terms of the UI. One way is to play at this view. So you got this zoomed in view, and you got your mini map to see the entire map. I think this is a very common way to play CVs. I used to play this way, but it starts to become a little bit too much for me. And the reason why is because you're looking at two different screens. One screen for the entire map, and the other screen is the action. For me, the second way is the preferred method. When I first started playing this way, which you look into the entire overview of the map, it feels not comfortable because you just see the entire map and you feel like you don't need to see it. One important skill when it comes to playing aircraft carriers is being aware. And in the process of scouting, you want to send your fighters all over the map, trying to get intel of the enemy fleet's position and then relay that information to your team. So the reason why I play on this map is because I avoid tunnel visioning. At the same time, I have a lot more control with this view, and there's less things on the screen that I have to worry about. I'm just focusing one thing, and that is the entire map, so I can see the entire map. At the same time, I can see what I'm doing, because some players are surprised that I'm able to actually shoot down planes on this side of the map while I'm working on this side of the map. It's because I'm able to look at both things at once. If you're playing in this zoomed in view, you can only do one thing at a time. Either that you are focusing on something here, or you're going to click here and then do something here. And that's a problem. And like I said, don't try to handle two things at once. You want to break it down. So if I'm scouting over here, I spot the enemy bombers. It is a game of search and destroy. Destroy the bombers first. That is my priority. People have different choices. Sometimes they prefer to strike the ship first. Some people prefer to destroy the bombers first. Personally, I want to search for the enemy bombers first and destroy them first. And the reason why is because when the bombers attack your ships, if you don't protect your ships, you're going to lose a ship. And when you lose a ship, that is one less ship on your team to try to win the game. So I personally feel like it's important that the number one thing that you do is to protect your ships first before you strike anything, okay? And after you destroy the enemy bombers, you have a 1 to 5 minutes gap or 1 to 4 minutes to be more precise, where the enemy can attack again, okay? And really depends on how you're keeping track of the bomber, because the other thing you have to realize is the flow of the game. When you're facing enemy CV, say for instance, I'm facing a S6. S6 takes 35 seconds to refuel, rearm her dive bombers, and she has 3 dive bombers and 1 torpedo bomber, which means that it takes time to travel back, it takes time to resurface those planes, and it takes time to find another target. In that meantime, after you actually defend it against the bombers, or you search and destroy those bombers, you have that time of gap to just worry about your bombers. So you're not worrying about protecting your ships no more, okay? Because you have already dealt with the bombers. The next attack is going to be within 3 minutes. So in that 3 minutes, while you're scouting and you're protecting, in this map view, I'm constantly moving things around. I'm going to set up for another attack, okay? And while I was scouting and searching for the bombers in the beginning match, I probably have spotted enemy fleet going towards A. And it's a little bit of map knowledge. So at the same time, I will set a waypoint towards this side of the map. While I'm waiting for these planes to travel, I'm going to continue scout for destroyers and all sorts of stuff that I need to do with the fighters. And I don't have to worry about the attack from the Essex because she is still refueling and rearming. Now, I had my bombers a little bit late to the party because I was a little bit focused talking about fighters, but while I was talking about fighters, the moment the Essex attacks, my bombers should be right around here ready for attack. Now, if you're in the process, okay, if you're in the process of defending your ship and you see an imminent attack, hold off on the bombers. The reason why I put my bombers on the edge of the map is not because I'm trying to strike the enemy warships yet. The reason I do it is because the outskirts of the map is the most safest spot, or at least the most concealed spot when it comes to your bombers. I want my bombers to be concealed. If my bombers are spotted by the enemy carrier and he knows where my bombers are at, he's going to send his fighters over there and they are pretty much compromised. There's no point of me trying to attack unless I wish to take my chance. So what I do is I find locations where it is safe to hold off on the bombers. Now, if you guys watch my carry gameplay, you notice that I have the habit of going left and right like this a lot. And the reason why I do that is because, number one, I want to prevent my mind from being asleep, because sometimes when we're like this, staring at the map, we sometimes kind of doze off, if I put it that way, and we're just waiting for something to happen, right? And when that happens, our mind goes into a state of not being alert. So in order to be alert, you want our minds to be constantly active. So I get into the habit of doing this. And the other reason I do this, especially with my fighters, is because if there is a destroyer over here, if I leave my fighters like this, it's gonna do a circle scout. The problem with this is that sometimes the circle scout isn't that active. Look how slow the planes are going. That isn't really that good of scouting. At the same time, doing a circle scout or circle path is that sometimes your fighters get caught into anti-air because it's this area that is going to fly around. I want to minimize the anti-air area. So when there's a destroyer here, potentially can drop torpedoes over here. So when I get into the habit of doing this, I do this a lot because the planes fly faster. And the reason I draw this particular line is because I want to scout for torpedoes while spotting the destroyers. At the same time, it's not doing a circular motion. I'm limited to this area, so it prevents it from being too close to anti-air. And it reminds me that I'm doing something here, so my brain doesn't fall asleep. That is why I like to get in the habit of doing these weird things. And sometimes I redraw it even though it's like perfectly fine, just to keep my mind occupied. Same thing goes here. That is why I do this with my fighters. I'm sure that somebody asked me why I do this weird habit when there's nothing really being achieved when you're looking at it, but when you think about it, I'm doing something. So in the time period of 2 to 3 minutes or 1 to 5 minutes, whatever the case it is, depending on how the enemy strikes, sometimes they strike in waves, sometimes they strike all in. And it really comes down to your knowledge of carriers, that if you know that the Essex only used 2 dive bombers or the Taiho only used her torpedo bomber, you haven't seen the dive bombers, most likely they're waiting for a dive bomb attack to happen. So you gotta keep that in mind. So let's say, for instance, while you fend off the torpedo bombers, your bombers are on the way, they have not been spotted, and you put this waypoint here to conceal them as best as possible because you don't want them to go circular around. You want to be as close to the border as possible to prevent the enemy from spotting your bombers. Let's say that you You shot down the planes over here, and you just happen to spot the enemy Bismarck. Now, after the planes are shot down, you don't have to worry about the attack because, like I said, there is this grace period where you can just let your fighters do whatever they want. So now you can cross off that list of worrying about the scouting part and searching the bombers because you have already done that job. Now you can shift your mind to the attack phase. Now, alright. Now, say for instance, another thing you want to know is that sometimes, when you're doing multiple things at once, one problem with the UI in this game is that you can't zoom into the squad that you are looking at. So if I select 2 and I zoom in like this, press M again, it goes to the location where I press M. So the way to, switch position from fighter to attack, those 2 modes, if I put it that way, is to spam either the 2 or 3 key for fighter mode, double tap it, or when you're ready for attack, you just double tap 4, and everything should be grouped up here. Because this is the safe zone. Remember, this is the waiting room. I don't have to worry about fighters. I already done my job taking down the planes. Now I'm ready for attack. Now, with Japanese carriers, there's different sequences. You can go in with your dive bombers first, or you can go in with your torpedo bombers. I personally go with the torpedo bombers first because I want to guarantee the alpha damage before the enemy realizes that I have attacked a ship. Because normally when you attack a ship and they spot planes, enemy carrier will send their fires on their way. So if I do my dive bomber first, it's more effective to do dive bombers because flooding does more damage, right? But I want to get that guaranteed consistent result. So while I'm waiting for my fighters to do this thing, I send my torpedo bombers and dive bombers to plan their attack. Now, the most effective way to attack a ship has always been to head on. Always. Why? Well, if your planes are behind the ship will see your planes already, number 1. And it's harder to catch a criminal than stop them in their pathway, right? So it's easier for the target to come towards you and then also approach them, so it has less time for the enemy ship to react. So I always approach the target head on. So always plan your attack. Don't rush. Speed is being built as you play more carriers. That is just a skill that naturally comes to you. Once it becomes second nature, you get used to this idea. You have the core fundamental concept of how to play carriers is planning. Plan everything out. Break it down, plan it, handle one thing at a time. Don't have to worry about fighters no more because we got that 5 minutes grace period. Now we're just going to worry about the bombers. So I'm going in with my torpedo bombers first. Now, when you're doing this little key stuff, it takes time to get used to, but once you play the carrier enough, you will get used to it. So I get used to this. So I just press 4, 5, and 6. Torpedo bombers first. They have already been set up in terms of the position. The better you set up your attack, the easier it is to attack unless you have to adjust. If you attack from here, the ship is going to see it, it's going to maneuver like crazy, and you're going to have a hard time taking down the ship. While the battleship or any ship that you're facing, they know where you're at, and they're going to be maneuvering like crazy. But if you attack at a good prepared position, they have less room to work with, and you don't have to worry about adjusting too much. All you have to do is just adjust for the attack, right? That's all you have to do. And this is all you're worrying about, the torpedo bombers. Dive bombers should be in some kind of location that you created that is safe, where the enemy ship does not, spot it, has not spotted the dive bomber. Just worry about the torpedo bomber. Shift your focus. Focus one thing at a time. The human mind has been proven that we can't multitask that well. We are good at focusing one thing, but when we're multitasking all over the place, we become less effective with one role. Remember, the carrier that makes the least amount of mistakes is the one that is going to do well in the game. It's not how fast you are with your carrier, how cool you are, how amazing you can pull off these attacks. The one that makes the least amount of mistake is the one that's going to succeed. So if you focus one thing at a time, you're going to make less mistakes. So I'm approaching the ship, going in for the attack, right? And ideally you want to attack head on and trying to aim for the broadside with torpedo bombers. Torpedo bombers take a lot of time to set up. Now, I know for a fact that the torpedo bombers are already committed. Meanwhile, I'm going to try to reposition my dive bomber and guess where the enemy ship is going to turn around. Like, he's going to react to this, right? So I'm going to react while he's trying to react also. Now, once he burns the damage control, you follow up with the dive bombers. And once you're done with the dive bombers, everything is all good. You don't have to worry about the bombers no more. Bombing mode is done because you have to wait for them to refuel, rearm, back to scouting, back to waiting, because by then, the enemy carrier has already rearmed the bombers. So now you're back to the guessing game, looking for the bomber, search and destroy, protect your ships, because protecting your warships will be rewarded greatly, because your team appreciate more when you protect them rather than bombing targets, unless you're required to bomb targets. Now, there are extreme situations where it's more important to bomb a target than protecting your ship if it's, it takes to win the game, but that is very rare. So aside from that, if you got any questions, this is the best way for me to approach the situation for me. This is how I view playing carriers. People like to play carriers like StarCraft 2, where you just spam the crap out the keyboard and move this, move that all over the place. I take it slow, and like I said, not everyone has the motor mind, if I put it that way. Not everyone has like the young, crazy, hyper person mind where they could do everything they want and they're good at it. I know for a fact that there's a lot of people out there who are older than me in terms of like in being in the 30s, 40s, 50s. They're not that, young or as excited, and they're not, in terms of the nerve, it starts to deteriorate as you get older, but it doesn't stop you from being a good carrier player. I can guarantee you that if you take it slow, you're as good, if not better, than a person who's just doing things randomly or just doing things in a rush. Just take it slow. Eventually, it becomes second nature, and you'll become good with carriers. That is really the best skill with the carrier. That is the most important skill that you gotta learn. Learn to micromanage. Take it slow. Break it down. Understand what your objective is. Protect your planes first, or protect your ships and your planes, and then follow up with the attack. Switch modes. Depending on your priority, figure out what you need, and while you have that grace period, like, waiting for the bombers to happen, find something productive to do, because there's always something that you can do with the carrier. Like I said, there's two different ways to play the UI. You can go down the zoomed in view with the minimap and the outside view. Personally for me, I like the big map view because, like I said, I just have to focus one thing. It's just the entire map. I see everything. I avoid tunnel visioning. Now, that's the view I recommend. It's hard to get used to in the beginning if you're really used to the first option, but personally I think it's more effective, and it really comes to people's personal preference. People who play the zoomed in view and the mini-map view can be as effective as the whole entire map view, but it's more difficult in my opinion. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.